Lately, I've been thinking about some of the units in Fire Emblem that are recruited by gold. I think they've been a bit hit or miss in actually being implemented. I think the concept of paying gold to recruit a unit makes sense and is a good idea, however, as I plan to show, there are typically nuances making each and every one of those different to some degree or another, and some being actually good and some being bad in how they implement it. For the sake of this video, we will only be focusing on units that are in the main series Fire Emblem games, so no, I don't care if there's some random character in Heroes that is recruitable with money, and there's also, I think, one in BSFE that requires money, but again, we're only focusing on the main series games. So before anyone decides to comment that, there's your disclaimer there. The only units we're really considering as a result are Beowulf from Genealogy, Volk from the Tellius games, Hugh from Binding Blade, Farina from Blazing Blade, and Renak from Sacred Stones. I'm going to give Beowulf and Volk a pass because Beowulf is the only sword cab you get in Gen 1 of FE4, and Volk, while in both Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn, he does technically have competition. He is arguably good enough both in combat and more importantly in his actual thief utility to actually be worth the gold that he is asking you to pay. There's other reasons going for them, but since I only really want to briefly touch on them in this video, I'll leave it at that. They both are a bit unique in their games and bring something to the table that no other unit is able to entirely beat them at, so I think they're honestly pretty fine. That leaves us with Hugh, Farina, and Renak. So let's start with Hugh from Binding Blade. Hugh has an interesting gimmick to him. So the idea is that he offers Roy to be recruited initially at 10k gold. The player can agree or decline, which will make him lower the price. Or if the player just doesn't have enough money to begin with at 10k, then Roy's just going to tell him, I don't have that money, so he'll just go down. He can go down after a few times to a minimum of 5k gold. However, this does come with its drawbacks. While 10k is the most expensive, it does give him the best possible bases. As you go down the prices, his bases also do get progressively worse. This is actually a very fun idea that sadly hasn't been retried, even though it's actually rather unique, and one could argue there's not necessarily one perfect option. If it was executed well. It would, in theory, give flexibility to the player. On the one hand, maybe you're like me when I recently did an Iron Man where my Lilina died early on, and my Lu was pretty cursed, so he was my only bet for a 4-blaze user. You know, I like this idea of being able to get a replacement, but there's a bit of a problem. I'll show you the corresponding bases of Hugh at his respective prices, depending on, you know, what gold amount you give him. I bought 10k Hugh in my Iron Man. These bases are not worth 10k, I can tell you. His growths and even promo gains still made for a pretty lackluster unit as well. I'll show those as well so you can judge for yourself. Part of this issue is that these are bases for a level 15 mage. If these were level 1 bases, well, he'd be broken. Or maybe if they're, you know, bases for like a level 10 or something, you know, I could still make some reason with that. You know, you have a lot of units in FE6 that, you know, they don't have the greatest of growth, but they have, you know, they start at a very low level, like Fear or someone, you know, like that, who, you know, actually has kind of bad growth, at least in strength, but she just has so many levels to grow, and they're very cheap, fast levels she can gain. But Hugh doesn't have that. He's actually kind of the opposite. He has pretty mid bases, and he starts at a very high level, so, you know, and his growths suck, so, you know, I mean, I guess not all of his growths suck, but the one, like, speed at 30%, come on. Absolutely, like, these growths suck for what you're looking at. I mean, I guess it fits his character. He is a con man. I remember hearing someone joke Hugh, more like huge waste of money, and yeah, it's not hard to understand why. You know, if I'm paying a huge sum of money, I should be getting something actually worth my trouble. I was having money issues for the rest of the game, and, you know, some people could just be like, haha, well, you're just not good at managing your money. Maybe they could say that, but that money is better spent elsewhere. You know, like you could buy angelic robes, I think you could buy 2 of them with a silver card. That money could be better put elsewhere. Even if you are lacking a bit on mage man power, she's just not worth the money. Next we have Farina. So, if I showed you Farina's bases without saying anything, even how you recruit her, just showed her bases and growth, the level you get her, you'd probably say, huh, that honestly looks pretty alright. She seems like a decent unit. Yeah, there's a few problems. The smallest being that she's limited to Hector mode, so people playing for the first time, or just on Ellwood mode for whatever godforsaken reason besides that, because who plays on that mode anyway, they're not going to be able to recruit her. Though, since most people play on Hector mode anyway, this is usually not an issue. What is, however, an issue is that she costs money, and a ridiculous amount of it. See, unlike Hugh, she's all or nothing. You know, you can't just sort of bargain and maybe get like a slightly worse rate. No, it's all or nothing. You can't get a trade-off for a cheaper recruitment, and even worse, she's twice the cost that most of these money recruits are. She costs 20k, not 10k. You could literally buy Hugh and Rennek, and that'd be equivalent to her actual price. Now, granted, they're all in different games, so obviously that is not the case, but I'm saying if they were all in one game, you could buy 2 for her price. If that says anything. Like, even for the expensive recruits, she's still costing more than them. You have less choice with her. And racking up that 20k at that point in the game can be a little tricky depending on the success of your run. What I mean to say is that if you're trying to train Dart for that run, the main thing people will sell to buy her is the Ocean Seal, and if you're trying to use Dart, you want that Ocean Seal. So, like, what are you going to be selling to make that money? You can definitely make it work without selling the Ocean Seal, but you're going to have to figure out something, and you're probably going to sell something you don't really want to sell in order to get that. It also depends on, of course, how well you're doing in terms of stealing money and valuables, but I'll leave it at that. Suddenly, those alright bases and growths not looking as appealing. I don't think her promo gains are something spectacular. Most units in this game don't gain much from promoting, unlike Blinding Blade. I can't really recommend her over Fiora and maybe even Florina. And I don't even really like Florina, but at least she's not charging me pretty much the worth of an Ocean Seal. Do not be a simp. Do not pay for this woman's OnlyFans. Or honestly, any of them. Do not pay for this character. Unless she's your only Pegasus Knight left. And even then, I don't know if she's really worth the money, to be honest. Lastly, we have Rennek, who is honestly done best out of these 3. And I don't even really have an issue with him. For starters, he's the only rogue you can recruit in that game, and it's very feasible you lost your Colm earlier, so getting another chance at your only possible rogue arguably is worth a decent sum of money. But you might be able to get him for the best price of all, 0 gold. If the player is able to catch Rennek and have La Rochelle talk to him, he joins you for free. This is great because it rewards the player for playing well enough to keep La Rochelle alive, but even if they didn't, or just forgot to field her, or, they're just not using her, whatever, they can still get him, you don't need La Rochelle to get him. And again, I'd argue a promoted thief that doesn't require lockpicks for 10k gold is a good deal. Like, that is a good price, you're foregoing the need of lockpicks for the rest of the run as long as you can keep the guy alive. And there's always stuff to steal, so that's actually a pretty good deal. And here's the thing, even if your Colm was still alive, Ocean Seals are rare, and Ross might be competing for it. So even if your Colm is alive and you are using him, you could still make the argument for getting Rennek. So overall, Rennek both offers something very unique no one else can cover. I mean, Thief utility is always good. You're always going to want that in an Iron Man, and you could be at risk of losing it in an Iron Man. You can also have the charges waived if you just play your cards right, and it's not that hard to do it right. I think Rennek is finally a good example of money recruitment in the GBA games, and sadly the only one, but I think they finally learned after 2 failed attempts. I think they finally figured it out. Understandably, some people would argue, and I'm sure I'm going to get some comment in the section, so I'm gonna say this right now. Not every unit is supposed to be good. Yeah, I fully understand, and I would agree with that, but look, just in Hugh and Farina's games alone, we're getting the likes of Gonzalez and Raven, Gonzalez in FE6 and Raven in FE7, for pretty much the same condition of just converting an enemy by conversation. But here's the thing, they're free, and their bases and growths are both very good for their join time. If I can get the likes of them for free, why is the 2 units that I have to pay 10k or 20k for start out so incredibly meh? Like, yeah, I do think that Farina actually can get good, but why do I have to pay so much for this when she's not really offering anything unique to the table? The most unique thing about her is the fact that she costs a crap ton of money that's just not worth it. What does she have over the other Pegasus Knights? What is her, what is her main selling point? Tell me, like, genuinely, what does she have? If this was like Skills Emblem or something, you could at least say, oh, maybe she gets like a really good skill or something. She doesn't, but this isn't Skills Emblem, so she doesn't even have skill. And her bases aren't really that impressive. A trained Fiora or Florina are probably going to be better than her at that level, or at least comparable. And they're not costing you any money, they're just costing you a bit of experience. Like, I don't mind units like Will, even though he's probably the worst unit in FE7, he sucks, but that guy's at least free. So the only thing you're wasting on him is EXP, and if you really go that far, maybe like an Orion's Bolt, but even then I don't think there's a whole lot of units that you really are going to be strapped for Orion's Bolts on, because who really use Orion's Bolt units in FE7 anyway, besides maybe like Wrath? So now I would like us to look into some possible fixes that might make Hugh and Farina actually worth recruiting. There's multiple approaches. For one, you could just give them better bases. Like, simple enough, just give them better stats to actually make me think, huh, that's actually worth the money. Because they're not utility units, they're not thieves, they're not staff users. Here's the thing though, when I mean better bases, some may find this extreme, but I'm talking like a capped stat or two. I mean, you're paying a lot of money. You should be getting something out of it. Especially in Farina's case, as she costs the most. She costs 20k. Look, man, like, I don't even know if Athos would be worth 20k. And you're telling me this random Pegasus that doesn't have anything special about her is worth 20k? Like, really? I like Pegasus Knights, and I don't think she's worth 20k. A lot of people don't even like Pegasus units. I do, and I still don't think she's worth 20k. Those stats are not worth 20k. They're meh stats. They're not terrible, but they're not amazing. And yeah, they're not. I don't even think they're worth any money. Those stats need to be a lot better if you want to sell it. What kind of stats are these? For Farina, it's pretty obvious. Just give her cap speed at her start level or something. In Hugh's case, I could see why a cap stat might be a little bit overtuned, because he's not really close to capping any particular stats besides maybe like magic. I'd definitely give his speed a buff though. 13 speed, 30% growth, +1 speed on promo gain. He's gonna have a hard time just doubling the wyverns a little bit later in the game. Like, he already has some issues doubling some of them. So like, let's at least make sure you can double them. Like, yeah, we're not talking about doubling swordmasters or anything crazy like that. I'm just saying, like, doubling wyverns, doubling the sort of stuff that's not particularly, extremely fast. Just let him be able to do that, and I think I'd be okay with that. His bulk over Lou and Lena is really about all he has currently, and it's not even like he's really tanky or anything. It's just like he can survive a shot, where Lou and Luna might not survive a hit. And that's not necessarily something to be proud of. That's a pretty low bar to set. I guess for a mage, it's a little impressive that he's got a little bit of bulk, but I don't know. I'm not really sold on the guy. Another idea might be lowering the price, or doing similar to Rennek and waiving the fee entirely, or discounted with the right unit talking to them. In Hugh's case, this could be Lou. For Farina, Florina and Fiora can both recruit. Other approach might be lowering Hugh and Farina's start levels, but keeping their bases the same. Now, to what level, I'm not entirely sure. It would probably be a little bit overkill for a level 1, but maybe like a level 7 or a level 8. Again, this is not exact. I'm not saying make them level 8. I'm saying just like somewhere around there, I think that'd be reasonable. I think that'd be fair. They'd have good bases for their level, but it wouldn't be game-breaking. That's more of an estimation than a clear definitive level, but these bases would be relatively good for a unit around that level. When I meant I want good stats, I did want good stats for their level. They should have good stats for their level. They should, like, if Gonzalez can have like 16 strength at level 5, these guys should have like 12 or 13 at level 5. Especially that you're paying for them. So they should have good stats for their join time. Now, I don't think they should be breaking the game, but they should have good stats. Hugh's bases only go down by 1 point per decline. I'd suggest maybe doubling the increments per decline to give more incentive to actually buying Hugh at full price. And to clarify a bit better, so that you guys aren't thinking, why would I ever want to go buy him at half price now? Well, let's start with his vanilla bases at 5k. Let's start with that as a baseline, and then let's go up by 2 per increment. So instead of him having like almost non-existent bases, let's have him have his 5k vanilla bases, but his 10k now modded bases. That would look pretty good. That would look very impressive. But that is only for 10k, mind you. So you actually have to pay for that. My final suggestion would be, instead of trying to readjust the stats, cost, or level, instead just making a simpler change of just having the unit come with an inventory that might make the buy worth it. Even if maybe the player doesn't exactly intend on using said unit, they might still gain something for their trouble. For example, with Hugh, I would suggest a slightly different start inventory, depending on what the player pays. For 5k, maybe he starts with his Hellfire Tome that he always has, and he gives you a Fire Tome. That's not really worth 5k, but as you go up the cost, you get better tomes. At 6k, now instead of fire, because he's always going to have Hellfire, right? He's keeping that Hellfire regardless. But now the prize he gives you is a Thunder Tome, at 6k. At 8k, you get an Air Caliber instead. And here's the big prize. Here's the reason why you buy at 10k. The reason you would buy at 10k is that you get a Bolting Tome, a second Bolting Tome. And yes, I'm fully aware that vanilla, the Bolting Tome is on the same map. I'm well aware. However, bolting is very good in this game since it's not incredibly heavy, and Lou and Lina could still make excellent use of this if trained. It is definitely very possible to double with bolting in this game, and they could make use of that. Heck, a good Hugh, if you believe that's possible, could double with it. I think you should get something pretty solid for 10k. If you're paying 10k for something, you should be getting something good out of it. Like I said, you can buy multiple stat boosters if you have a silver card for 10k. You should be getting something good. I know I've said that like 10 times in this video. Why do we get 2 mediocre units for a high price? It doesn't make any sense. In Farina's case, I'd maybe just give her a Brave Lance, although it probably would weigh her down a ton, but it is still a Brave weapon. We could also start her with a stat booster, such as a Speed Wings or even an Energy Ring, of which there's actually absolutely zero in Hector mode. Unless you intend on playing Lin mode before the Hector mode, you literally never get an Energy Ring, so think about that. This could be a way to remedy that. Also, it'd be maybe interesting to see her get the Hue treatment, and by that I mean where she has varying costs. So there's varying rewards or punishments depending on how much or little you're willing to pay. Because 20k with 0 variance just seems weird, it's boring, it's also just ridiculous. I mean, I would love to see that sort of money system where you get your choice of how much to pay, and you pay the price, no pun intended, or you reap the benefit. I like it because it gives the player more choice. There's more variance in how a playthrough could go that way. I should emphasize that these are possible solutions and are separate options. I'm not suggesting to do all these changes at once. That would absolutely destroy the game. It's more of a take your pick. I'm suggesting for the audience, the viewers, I'm suggesting we can do this, or we can do this, or we can do this. I'm not saying we're doing all of this. I figure at least one, though, is a good idea that'd work well and not really ruin the game's balance. I mean, this is discussion.